Good evening to you for Telesur. I'm Regan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. Welcome to our evening news program from the south. We begin with the headlines. Residents evacuated in Brazil for fear of the potential of another dam bursting. The president says the mining companies must pay. FARC prisoners on a hunger strike demanding better treatment and the release of some. And deadly bombs explode in Beirut in a populated area, killing and wounding many. The details on these and other stories now on From the South. Thank you once again for being here with us. More residents of a southeastern Brazilian valley where two dams burst last week have now been evacuated for fear that a third dam could burst, unleashing even more toxic waste. 8 people died, some 20 are still missing, and over 600 were left homeless when a mudslide of residue from a mining operation buried the village of Bento Rodrigues outside the historic city of Mariana. The toxic waste then swept 500 kilometers down the Rio Doce River, contaminating communities and farms on its way. President Rousseff has flown over the region and said the mining companies responsible must pay.
We are working to hold to account those who are responsible. Who is responsible is a private company called Samarco, a large company, whose partners include Vale do Rio Doce, or rather Vale, no longer known as Vale do Rio Doce, and BHP. These companies must take responsibility for various things. Firstly, for the response to the emergency, a search for more stable, durable solutions. And thirdly, for the reconstruction and the capacity to resolve problems that they face by each person affected by the disaster.
As pressure mounts on the companies responsible, the CEOs of both parent companies, the Brazilian Vale and the Anglo-Australian BHP Billiton, visited the devastation. The government has already fined the mine operator $67 million. But Deutsche Bank estimates that a full cleanup of the contamination could cost as much as $1 billion.
As an immediate step, together with Vale, we pledge to support Samarco and to create an assistance fund for rebuilding works and to help quickly affected families and communities.
Ahead of World Climate Talks in Paris this month, Brazil pledged to slash its carbon emissions by 43% by the year 2030, and much of that reduction will have to come through a new emphasis on renewables. A shortening of the wet season means that hydroelectric energy has dropped from 80% of the country's total energy output some years ago to 67% this year. But there is increasing investment in wind energy, which currently makes up less than 4% of Brazil's total output, but is expected to rise to 8% by 2018.
The proposal submitted officially by the government ahead of Paris outlines a very large expansion in renewable energy sources, such as wind, solar, and other sources. It will be a change in course. Until now, what complemented hydroelectric production was thermoelectric power, which caused a great increase in Brazilian greenhouse gas emissions.
What we've observed in relation to wind energy in particular, like all renewable energy sources in Brazil, is that the growth is going to be exponential. We expect renewable energy to double in the next 15 years in Brazil. And with the direction and strength of the winds here in the northeast, we're sure that wind energy is a source that is here to stay and which will grow significantly in the coming years.
One of the key issues in the lead-up to Argentina's runoff presidential election is the divergent economic platforms of the two contenders, Daniel Scioli and Mauricio Macri. To learn more about what Argentinians think, our correspondent Laureano Ponce brings the details from Buenos Aires.
The two front-runners in Argentina's presidential race will go to a runoff on November 22, as dictated by the Constitution. One of the key issues for working families across the country are the measures that a future government might take and how a turn to the right under Macri would affect their day-to-day life.
This is simple. If Macri wins, we go back to the 1990s. There is no other way around it. The first thing he would do is to favor big businesses, to lower salaries. He would increase foreign debt, and it is not us who are going to pay for it, but our children. So I say no.
Some of the most important economic initiatives carried on by the Front for Victory's government still find a strong support. Social welfare measures like the Universal Child Allowance are viewed positively by 62% of the population according to several polls, and the unemployment dropped to 6% in the last trimester. This is why the continuation of such policies is one of the main topics in the road to the runoff.
I did not vote for either of the two frontrunners, but I believe it is time to listen to those who want change. There are some things that have been done right, like human rights matters or the Universal Child Allowance, which should not be changed.
While the specific initiatives that the right-wing presidential hopeful Mauricio Macri would carry on if elected have not been made public by his Cambiemos coalition, his views about reducing overall state intervention in the economy are seen as dangerous by many experts.
Every time the state disappears, the market destroys itself. This is something we are seeing in some European countries and that we have never thought it could happen.
While the people's expectation for the economy remains centered on the continuation of wealth distribution policies, measures like reducing import and export taxes for the ruling sectors do not seem to point in the same direction. Laureano Ponce, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
Colombia's FARC guerrillas have set out a series of steps towards becoming a legal political force. The announcement comes as the Colombian Senate has been debating a measure that would prevent former guerrillas from participating in politics. Another important issue will be discussed in the current round of talks is paramilitary groups which continue operating throughout the country. And that paramilitary activity is one of the main concerns of Colombia's Broad Front for Peace, which has just presented its 8th report on the FARC's unilateral ceasefire. The coalition of social and political movements also expresses concerns about the deployment of the army in communities affected by the conflict. Their report praises the guerrillas' efforts to maintain their ceasefire, as well as their initiative to stop purchasing weapons. Political prisoners from the FARC are on hunger strike in 13 different detention centers across Colombia. They're complaining of ill treatment and a lack of medical care and are demanding the immediate release of some prisoners on humanitarian grounds. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita reports from Bogota.
For the past 14 years, since her husband was captured in combat, Ana Lucia has had to carry upon her shoulders the weight of the stigmatization for being the wife of a FARC rebel. But beyond that is the sorrow she feels every time she visits him and comes across the conditions under his being held.
We have lots of complaints regarding the health care. Some peers have even died in jail due to the negligence of the state. We have denounced that, carried out protests and many other actions, but the situation remains unknown.
Despite of having never carried a weapon, Aurelio Sancol, a rural leader, is also part of Colombia's 10,000 estimated political prisoners. Aurelio recalls that be it members of the insurgency or not, what all those convicted of political crimes share in common is the harsh treatment they receive.
Those who think different from the establishment, who come from renovated ideas and alternative change, are considered by the Colombian state and the oligarchy in this country as more dangerous than any other criminals. The standard criminals have no importance for them, as they don't pose a threat to institutionalism.
The lack of medical care and a differential treatment are among the reasons why some imprisoned members of the FARC have begun an indefinite hunger strike. As a gesture of goodwill within the current peace negotiations, they are demanding from the government the immediate release of those under serious illness conditions.
The government has been asked to provide a humanitarian solution, especially for those critically ill, terminally ill, or with serious combat injuries. If the release is not granted on humanitarian grounds, they will very likely die in a prison, as it has already happened with many others.
Now, the hunger strikers have called on United Nations representatives to verify the prison's conditions, which human rights advocates have said are not complying with international humanitarian law standards regarding political prisoners' treatment. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
The 13 Mexican students arrested on Wednesday in Ayotzinapa have been released At least 8 of the students were hospitalized, some of them in critical state, according to local media. The detention took place after the students held up a gas tanker on its way to one of the schools in the region. The buses were wrecked, and according to the students, some of the youths are missing.
This is very dangerous for them. Their integrity is at risk. We are worried because they continue with this line of stigmatizing the students, calling them vandals. They keep looking at them as criminals.
President Nicolás Maduro has been defending Venezuela's commitment to human rights at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. The Venezuelan leader said that the election of his country to the 47-nation UN body was a demonstration of international support. However, the president also recalled that his country has been under constant assault from the United States.
Venezuela has been the victim of almost 2 decades of constant harassment by the United States. You know, Venezuela suffered a coup d'etat planned and financed in April of 2002. Even before the invasion of Iraq, declassified documents show how it was prepared, the way in which hatred was created to manipulate the population, the coordinated international efforts to isolate Venezuela's government and to justify the coup.
A Chilean priest accused of child abuse has given evidence in a case against the church for allegedly protecting him. Fernando Caradima denied committing the crimes while he was the parish priest in an exclusive Santiago neighborhood. In 2010, a Chilean court closed the case against him because the alleged offenses happened too long ago. But 3 victims of the abuse are now suing the Catholic Church after letters from church leaders came to light revealing attempts at a cover-up.
This is a sign of respect. He's being treated in a dignified way, even though, according to the Catholic Church and Chile's civil justice, he is responsible for severe and repeated abuse of minors. So I think that's what we have all shown by treating him with respect. This is proof that we're not looking for payback. We're looking to shed light on questions and to determine who is responsible.
Work is underway in Chile on what is expected to be the world's largest telescope. The first stone was laid on Wednesday on a mountain in the Atacama Desert. When it is completed in 2021, the giant Magellan telescope should produce images 10 times more detailed than NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. After the 2009 coup d'etat in Honduras, sex education was prohibited by the ultra-conservative forces that took control of the government. 6 years later, a new law has been presented in Congress to make this subject mandatory from elementary school through to university.
Lawmaker Shirley Arriaga has been working for the last 2 years with different women's organizations and other human rights defendants in the creation of a law that includes sex education in the education system and cancels the censorship imposed by the ultra-conservative groups that took over the control of the government since 2009.
There is a necessity of discussing sexuality in Honduras. The lack of this has made us the continent's 2nd country with the highest rate of pregnancy on minors, and with a big number of people infected by sexually transmitted diseases. We have been discussing with different organizations, and in this moment, the law has been presented to include sexuality to the academic syllabus in all educational levels, from kindergarten to university, just like any other subject.
The law has enough support to pass in Congress. For Jessie Pineda, who has never had this subject, it will be something new that she believes is urgent for the country's younger citizens.
This is a very important subject for the youth because we are uninformed, and also we can see all the problems of undesired pregnancy that we have in teenagers. Also that young people don't even know of the infections and disease that we can have. This is why it is so important they implement this.
The creation of this new law and the access to sexuality information for all the population is an important step back on one of the many conservative laws and decisions imposed to the population after the military coup of 2009 that had the support of the most conservative groups. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
We take a small break now, but let me tell you what's coming up next. Suicide bombers kill over 40 people in Lebanon and injure hundreds more. This story and more next.
The truth behind the power. We lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open file. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today. With Bill Fletcher. The Global African. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Two bombs minutes apart exploded in the Burj El Balijna area, a predominantly Shia residential area of southern Beirut. Lebanon's health ministry confirmed that these were the work of suicide bombers. At least 41 people are now dead and some 200 others injured. Authorities said that it is currently unclear who committed the acts or what the reasons were. Residents fear a repeat of last year, where southern Beirut suffered a series of deadly suicide bombings. A nationwide strike in Greece left the streets almost barren this Thursday as airline, transportation, education and medical workers stayed at home in protest against the harsh austerity measures which form part of the country's billion-dollar bailout agreement with international lenders. The strike was the first nationwide walkout in a year.
Taxation is strangling us, and the price hikes can't be dealt with. Unfortunately, we can't raise our children and send them to university. Our biggest worry is that at this moment, Greece is lost.
Another protest, this time in Turkey. A small group of about 20 demonstrators stood on the roof of local television station NTV with a sign saying, "Get lost G20." This in response to the G20 summit currently taking place in Turkey with a focus on the current global economic issues. The demonstrators said that their protest was also in support of Aziz Gula, who died fighting in Rojava, but whose body authorities are preventing from being returned. Police arrested 9 of the 20 demonstrators. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is currently in the UK meeting with Prime Minister David Cameron to strengthen bilateral ties. However, not everyone is happy about this visit. Reports are that about 500 people demonstrated outside Downing Street, many of whom were Sikhs, neither Muslim nor Hindu. Modi has previously been accused of not protecting minorities in India.
India has put a blockade on to Nepal. We are a landlocked country. Nepal has suffering schools, hospitals, and just basic things. We don't have access from other place. So Modi, the Prime Minister of India, has to respect our sovereignty and respect the Nepalese people, the freedom. That's why we are here to protest. Modi has to listen our voice and has to lift up the blockade to Nepal.
Wednesday, November 11th, marked the 11th anniversary of the death of former Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, and groups in Gaza commemorated the day, calling for the reopening of the investigation into his assassination. More now with our correspondent Noor Harazin.
Palestinian groups in the Gaza Strip protested Wednesday at the United Nations headquarters in Gaza City in commemoration of the 11th anniversary of the death of the late president of the Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat. The protesters called on the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to form an international committee to find those responsible for what they believe was Arafat's assassination. Arafat died at the age of 75 in 2004 at a military hospital in Paris, aimed at suspicions that he was poisoned. In 2012, a doctor's committee agreed that they found polonium in Arafat's body. However, in July 2015, the French public prosecutor made a request to drop an investigation filed by Arafat's widow, Suha, into the case behind her husband's death. Arafat is considered an iconic leader of the Palestinian people and still revered in the region.
We really need someone like Arafat who negotiated with the Jews and at the same time supported the military resistance. We are in need of a military struggle, not a popular revolution and throwing stones. I believe if Arafat was still alive, many things would have changed. Because when he was alive, he really made a lot of changes.
During his life, Arafat founded the Fatah Party, and then in 1964 he created the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, which led the struggle of the Palestinian people against the Israeli occupation. In 1993, Arafat signed the Oslo Peace Accords with the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, which granted the Palestinian Authority a limited autonomy in certain areas of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. On Tuesday, the day before the anniversary of Arafat's death, Hamas officials in Gaza Strip handed over Arafat's Gaza home to officials from his Fatah Party. The house has been closed since 2007 after Hamas beat Fatah forces under Mahmoud Abbas. It will now be opened as a museum on the life of Arafat. Nur Harazin, Telesur TV, Gaza.
On Wednesday night, 21 members of an elite Israeli military undercover force raided the Al-Ahli hospital in Hebron and shot dead a 27-year-old Palestinian. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the commandos wanted to question Azam al-Shalalder, who was in the hospital awaiting surgery after being shot by Israeli security forces. His cousin Abdullah had attempted to prevent them from doing so after they barged into Azam's hospital room. The Israelis killed him as well. World leaders are unsure how to initiate a ceasefire in Syria, making the long road to resolving the crisis a major challenge. Diplomats arrived in Vienna again this Thursday, following up on the historic October 30th meeting, which included the United States, Russia, Syria and Iran. However, there is yet to be determined a way forward to end the war, which has already claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and has resulted in a seemingly unstoppable refugee emergency. There are new developments in Syria which may have put a pause on a Turkey-US coalition invasion to oust Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Telesur's Hazem Abdullah is there. He filed this report.
Syrian army succeeded in freeing the Queris military airport, which is basically a military air training college and the most important air base in the eastern countryside of Aleppo. This liberation has ended a siege imposed by ISIS terrorists for nearly 2 years.
We thank our brothers in Venezuela and the peoples of Latin America and all liberals of the world for standing by us. This victory is the beginning of many victories in Syria and will be the beginning of the defeat of terrorists, which we will remove from every inch of Syria. And it will be a victory for all the world's liberal on the reactionary.
This achievement is a significant development in terms of military fighting in Aleppo between the Syrian army and its supporters on one hand and ISIS and the West-supported opposition fighters on the other hand. This is due to the fact that controlling the airport will cut off all supply routes between the east and the north of the country, and because of it put the armed opposition in the south and west of Aleppo under siege by the regular forces.
This victory today is the key to the complete victory soon. We are counting on our military, which will cleanse the land of Syria from the impunity of terrorism. This army and its leader, President Bashar al-Assad, will defeat terrorism, and we owe it to our friends, the Russians and Iranians, and the BRICS, for standing by our side all this time.
The Syrian army keeps its attacks against terrorists on the northern region of Syria, supported by the Russian jets. And this progress is now going towards the east and northeast of Aleppo city. Seizing Aquarius airport has a great strategic importance and was a serious blow to the terrorists, despite the fact that it weakens other areas in the countryside of the southern of Aleppo and northern of Hama in central of Syria, now more vulnerable to opposition fighters. Azam Abdullah, Telesur TV, Syria.
And now a brief look at other stories making news around the world.
The United Nations has agreed to the creation of a global flight tracking system which will allow the reporting of the position of aircraft that are equipped with automatic dependent surveillance broadcast systems. The move is aimed at preventing a reoccurrence of disappeared planes like Malaysian flight MH370. France has expressed concern over statements made by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who said that the COP21 climate change summit to be held in France in 2 weeks will not result in a global treaty. France's foreign minister said that the bureaucracy of the U.S. Congress may have influenced Kerry's statement. A new razor-wired fence is being erected this time by Slovenia along its border with Croatia. The government said that the move is to help them better manage the influx of refugees into the country. And Poland's Prime Minister Ewa Kopacz issued a stern warning to the country's new government after her Liberal Party's defeat at the elections. She told the Conservative Law and Justice Party that she will not overlook any lies and that her party will hold them to every promise.
On Wednesday, President Vladimir Putin announced that he has ordered an inquiry into allegations of major drug abuse in Russian athletics. Putin said that Russia must do what is necessary to stamp out the reported systematic doping, which could result in the country being barred from all competitions. The IAAF, the athletics world's governing body, has given Russia until Friday to come up with the answers to the allegations that its athletes were using performance enhancement drugs. Putin has met with sports chiefs ahead of that deadline. And to close this evening, the 2015 Cervantes Prize has been awarded to Mexican novelist Fernando del Paso. It's regarded as the Nobel Prize of Hispanic Literature. Del Paso is 80 years of age and is one of Mexico's most celebrated writers. The jury, responsible for awarding him with the prize, said that they recognized Del Paso's contribution to the development of novel writing, combining tradition with modernity. And that's it from us this evening. Remember, there is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And of course, you can join us on Twitter and on Facebook for even more. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, I'm Regan Devines. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.